Hey guys, welcome back to another Helix video. Thanks for checking it out. It's been a couple, 3 weeks since I've done one of these. Things have just been really busy and I haven't had time to do the fun stuff I want to do, like make Helix videos. But thanks for your patience, and it's good to be back making one of these. I had a few questions on the forum or the Facebook group more specifically, and my YouTube channel. And one of the last ones posted was just about making a patch just from scratch. So I think what I'm going to do is that exactly, and try to get detailed, and hopefully through the process of this answer all the other stuff that's been asked. So if I miss something, don't be afraid to point it out in the comments. I glanced back through some of the questions, but perfectly reasonable to assume that I'm going to miss something. So don't be afraid to point that out. So I'm going to treat this video like if you're watching it, you're brand new to Helix. So some of this might be a little rudimentary if you're an experienced Helix user. But I'll try not to make it too boring, but yet at the same time cover the basics. So Helix 101, what we're looking at here, and this is the editor application. You can do everything I'm getting ready to do on the Helix unit itself, and it looks pretty much like this. But for making these videos, it's easier to use the application. So these two lines are your paths. These are both stereo paths, and you can split them into A and B and have basically a total of 4. You have 1A, 1B, 2A, 2B. So you have a total of 4 paths altogether, if need be. At the beginning of each path, you tell it where to look for signal. I have this set to multi, which means it's looking in anything plugged into the guitar, auxiliary, or Variax input is going to come through. Noise or input gate, if you have a noisy patch or a noisy guitar, this is what this is for. You can set your threshold and decay here. If you don't know how a noise gate works, just Google that. It's basically a noise gate, pretty straightforward. Below here you have all your Variax settings. Maybe I'll do a Variax video at some point, but I don't want to spend a whole lot of time going through all this because a lot of folks watching this probably aren't going to be Variax users. But that's where you'll find the Variax settings. So let's jump right into this thing. I like to start around the middle of the path when I start putting stuff in, because there's going to be things I want to put in front of the amp, such as distortion or wah or something of that nature. And then there's stuff I'm going to want to put after the amp, such as reverbs and modulations and delays. So that's why I kind of like to start in the middle. I can always shift things around as needed if I need a slot here and there, but somebody had asked me why I started in the middle. That's why. So let's start with an amp. What I'm going to do is build basically an amp pedal board type of patch where the amp is a cleanish amp, and we're going to use pedals to achieve whatever we want to achieve. You have 2 options. One is an amp plus cab, which puts it all in one block. You can change the cab and the cab settings, but it's all in one block. Versus if you do an amp, you can have a separate cab block. The advantages there are you can do dual cab, and then if you want to have 2 different paths, which we'll get to in a second, you can have a cab in each path. It gives you a little more flexibility. Takes up a little more real estate on your paths here, but that's just going to come down to preference and your needs. And this one I am going to do an amp by itself, and then we'll put the cabinet in. So I'm going to use this Vox phone normal channel. All right. Before I adjusted any, I need to put a cab on there so we can see what we're doing. I'm going to do a dual cab. May as well use the Vox. The Vox cabinets would make sense with this one. So we did silver bell, so we'll do the blue bell. I'm just going to kind of use some of my go-to settings. This video isn't going to be so much about like getting the perfect tone. This is more of just I'm trying to just going to be trying to explain concepts and that sort of thing. So let me tell you what I just did. I changed the microphone selection. I tend to like ribbon and condenser mics. It's just a personal preference. You may like dynamic mics, but so I'm using the 121 ribbon here, U67 condenser here. Okay, these low and high cut, these are basically low pass and high pass filters. These are ways of chopping off sections of the EQ band at where you can determine the frequency that it cuts off at, which is really useful. Typically, you know, an electric guitar is going to sit right in the mid-range of an EQ curve. You know, you got bass guitar for the bottom end, you know, other vocals and you know, cymbals and other things are going to occupy, well, depending on your vocalist. But the point is, there are things occupying the high and low space, and electric guitar typically sits right in the middle. So it makes sense to be able to cut off highs and lows as needed. I'm just going to do some real generic settings rather than take a lot of time to tweak this, just to kind of show you how this works. You know, I would say you can comfortably cut anywhere from 9 to 13 kilohertz. So I'm just going to do 10, and then I'm going to cut the low about 80 hertz just to make sure there's no muddiness on the bottom end. I'm going to do this on both cabinets. Again, I'm just kind of doing generic settings from memory of things I've done in the past that have sounded okay to my ears. Take your time, experiment with these settings. One quick tip here is you can come to the front of the chain. Now, if you're going to use a looper live, you don't want it typically at the front, because then anything you turn on, off, or changes you make post looper are going to affect what's in the loop. But, and we'll do this for the sake of building this patch. If you want to throw a looper, we'll just do a mono looper. Up here what we can do is we can actually use the looper to record a loop and then let it play while we tweak these settings, which is pretty helpful, because that way, you know, we can kind of, without having to be playing at the same time, we can adjust the amp and cab. So let me assign this to a foot switch so I can turn the looper on and off. I'm just going to do foot switch 1 for now, because this looper isn't going to stay there. So this way, what this allows me to do now is, if you were looking down at the physical unit, foot switch 1 is saying looper on the scribble strip. So when I hit foot switch 1, it puts it in the looping mode where I can control the looper, which I just did. I'm using, by the way, a Strat neck, so pretty clean sound. We haven't got any reverb on there yet, so it's going to be a little dry. So let me loop a little chord progression, and then we'll tweak the amp settings. And this is a pretty quick way to kind of get there while hearing the changes in real time. So, okay, so here we go. Okay, so there's the loop. So come over to the amp. All right, so like I said, what I want to do is make basically a clean amp that we're going to use pedals to modify the tone to. So we've kind of getting in that ballpark. Now again, this is not trying to build like the perfect tone. You know, I'm just ballparking it here. So just kind of showing you how the loop works so we can tweak tones that way. So So let's do something else here. Let's throw in an impulse response to go along with our regular cabinet, and then we're gonna move this down into a bottom path. So let's see here. Let's do. I think I've got a box in here somewhere. Since there we go. All right, so okay, so that's basically kind of what we're doing anyway. Again, I'm not so worried about like the tone and impact of this. This is just showing you how it's done as far as the building part. So what I'm going to do is click and drag and bring it down here. Okay, so now what we have is and the amp splits. And if you click on that, you can see the split. Right now, it's what's called a split Y. Split Y is just an even 50-50 split. No adjustments, no changes. Excuse me. If you change it to an A-B split, if it's set in the middle, it's even, just like a Y, or you can pan it one way or the other. So in this case, I don't really want to pan it. I just need it to kind of go evenly. So see if there are any tone impact of adding that IR. A little bit of a subtle difference, but again, it was more I just want to start talking about splits and paths and that sort of thing. So, we've got an amp, we've got a dual cab here, and we've got an IR here. So, one of the things I like to do is add a little bit of reverb. You can do it a couple of ways. Let's say I put a reverb right here. So let's just grab a room reverb. All right, so just, not too crazy, just a regular reverb. So right now what's happening is the amp comes here, your signal hits the amp, hits the split, 50-50, hits the cab. The cabinets are feeding into the reverb because we see this line go here. But the IR is not in any way hitting the reverb because it doesn't join back up here. Now, we can have it where, would be a wet dry, but we can have it to where the reverb affects both. If we take this merge point here, and I'll talk real quickly about this merge mixer. Anywhere the paths come back together, you got a merge mixer. So, you've got A level, A pan, B level, B pan. You can change the polarity and then the overall level. So, of course, A is your top line, B is your bottom line. So if you want to pan or change the level, that's where you would do it. One other quick little cool thing you can do is you can actually click and drag merge points. So by clicking and dragging it, now we have two discrete outputs. So right now, they're both just going out. By multi, it just means it's going out of the XLRs, the 1/4 inch USB. Now, let's say I wanted to keep just a dry signal, amp, IR, dry out, done. But I want to get kind of crazy with top path. I can come up here, and I can select path 2A. So now, this is going down to 2A. And anything I put in this path is going to affect the signal, whereas this is still just going straight out. So that's kind of cool. You can really do this whole wet. When I say wet dry, what it means is one path is wet, meaning it has effects, and one path is dry, meaning it does not. Merging this back, let's say we wanted the reverb to affect both cabinet and IR, we can simply drag this mixer point right here. So what that does is, if you follow the line, it reintroduces the IR back up here to where now both are going through the reverb. So there's both reverb. There's just reverb on one. So basically it sounds wet, what they say wetter, more affected. You've got reverb here. Let me crank the reverb up to make it really, really obvious. So there's 100% reverb. And whoops, sorry. There's a little behind the scenes look at Ableton. All right, so now we'll cut this over here. Now you can hear that, you know, that dry signal's coming through. And it's being mixed with that 100% wet, whereas if I move it back over here, you know, you've got, you know, that should make sense. You know, basically anything after the mixer gets fed through whatever's in the line. So if we move the mixer back here, this reverb doesn't affect it. So let's get this reverb back down into normal land. Okay, so I hope that makes a little bit of sense of splits and merges and how those are used and why those are used. And I did a dual path video earlier, but keeping with that theme, I'm going to add a couple of things here to make this top path a little wetter. Throw a delay on there. I really like the Memory Man model. It's kind of my go-to. I like dotted eighth. I find something I like and stick with it. So it's fun to go back and do some experimenting. I do that as well, but like I said, I'm just kind of doing a go-to settings for this. So now we've got that delay. Again, if I take this merge point, pull it in front of the delay, everything gets delayed. If the merge point is after, only the top line gets delayed. All right. So hopefully so far that makes pretty good sense. Again, if we are, I'll take this looper out in a second. We'll put other stuff here. But if I was to trigger the loop that I'd recorded earlier, what I can do is I come over here and just tweak this stuff and see how that's going to affect the tone. So we'll turn the loop on for a second and play with some of these settings real quick. But you can just kind of see, having that looper up here is kind of a fun way to test stuff. Also, I guess I kind of take for granted, I kind of go through these settings quickly on effects and things, but let me slow down for a minute and just, if you're, like I said, I'm trying to treat this as you're completely new to Helix and or multi-effects. So on a delay pedal, feedback is the number of repeats. So if it's on 0, 1 repeat. If it's on 100%, it's basically never going to stop. And it'll eventually kind of create what they call a feedback loop. That's a setting that I adjust, quite a bit as I'm setting up a patch mix. 0 means no delay, 50 means delay and signal, dry signal are the same, 100% means all delay. On this particular one, it's got a modulation or a chorus. This is where you set the depth of that, how present you want that modulation to be. You can boost the level of delay. Scale, I'm actually, this particular model, I'm not sure what scale represents. So maybe somebody can tell me in the comments what that means on this pedal. Trails on and off, I believe that refers to if they're on, when you turn the delay pedal off, the trails keep going as they would, where the opposite is if the trails are off, as soon as you turn the delay pedal off, then the delays stop. I believe that's right. Let me assign this to a foot switch, and we'll make sure that I'm not telling you stories. So make this foot switch 2. Come back home. Okay, trails are off. So okay, so trails are on. Yep, exactly what it is described. So if the trails are on, when you turn the effect off, it'll keep delaying until it gets done, until the feedback's done. All right, little 30-second delay primer there. On the reverb, the only thing I was really adjusting is the mix, meaning the ratio of dry signal to reverb signal. So anyway, so we've kind of got, so far, we've got an amp, a dual cab, an IR, a little bit of reverb, a little bit of delay. We've got them splitting here. So the IR is dry, merging back here, and so far it's just going straight to the outputs. I think that's pretty straightforward so far. So let's put a couple things in front here. Let's do, I kind of like having a compressor. I'm going to jump to mono because I'm running out of DSP. This video really isn't going to address stereo versus mono very much at all. So I'm just going to go with mono. I like the LA compressor quite a bit. Really getting into the deep analysis of compressor parameters is a little bit past the scope of what I want to try to accomplish with this video. So basically I'm just going to turn this effect on. A compressor, for anybody who doesn't know, is it brings the loudest signal down and boosts the quietest signal up a little bit. It squeezes it basically. And it's a nice way to kind of hit the front of the amp. The gain is how hard it's going to hit. The peak reduction is how much it's compressing. This is a pretty simple compressor to work. But, so you can hear it kind of giving that squeeze sound like without it. And then you turn it on. It's kind of makes it a little more lively. I tend to run a compressor and just leave it on my main patch. I can't remember. I think I might use a deluxe compressor because this gives you a little bit more control over the ratio and the threshold. If you're not familiar with these, it's worth look up on YouTube videos about compressors or read some articles about it, because it's worth taking the time to kind of understand some of these settings to help get the most out of it. But like I said, this isn't a perfect tone video. This is a proof of concept video. So I'm just going to throw the LA Studio comp on there and be done with it. Let's throw a little distortion on there. Let's see. With the IR and the dual cab, we're actually running a little bit low on DSP. So actually, this is a good example about DSP management. So let's say we built this patch and we wanted to use a tube screamer or the Minotaur or something. We're kind of stuff we want to use that's we're not able to because we're out of DSP. That's what the red means. White we can use. The red means that there's not enough DSP left to do it. So what do we do about that? We like this patch so far. We don't want to make compromises. Let's say that we even want to keep this wet-dry kind of paradigm we've got going on. But so what do we do? How do we get more DSP room? So what I'm going to do, I'm going to grab this merger and pull it down. And then I'm going to send this to 2A. So that means now this guitar signal is coming here. So now I'm going to copy and paste the delay and reverb down here. And so that will allow me to come up here and remove them from the top line. This dual cab and IR, this is eating up a lot of DSP. That's why we're kind of running low, by the way. So now let's go back and see where we're standing now. Okay, so we've freed up enough to where we can do whatever drive pedal we want to do. So just remember, well, I haven't mentioned it yet, so let me explain this. Each path, there's 2 DSP chips inside of the Helix. So each path is run by its own chip. So that's a nice way to split up and split up the workload, so to speak. So by moving this reverb and delay down, we've freed up some space here. So now let's add a tube screamer. All right. So now we've got this going. Nice bluesy tone. You can really hear a distortion pedal is going to compress the signal anyway, and then running it straight into a compressor before the amp, you can really hear it squeeze, you know, the sound. You know, if we turn the compressor off, turn it back on. You know, one thing, a compressor tends to make things more punchy, but you can also kind of hear it, the attack and release is kind of squeezing it a little bit, which is kind of a cool effect. So let's go ahead and get rid of this looper. We don't need it up here anymore. Another thing that I would tend to put in front of an amp is a wah pedal. Let's see how we're looking DSP wise. No problem here. Let's pick this one. Let's assign it to expression pedal 1. That's fine. And the foot switch expression toe. That means the expression toe means when you push down on the expression pedal, there's a toe switch that's going to flip back and forth. So when, yeah, just hit it with my foot, you see it light up. Pretty straightforward there. Cool thing about some of these wahs, like the throaty, is you can set the low and high frequency, which is really cool. So you can set it, you know, for how high up you want it to go, and then how low you want it to go. So if you know, if you want it to go super high end, drag that up, and or if you want it more thick and throaty. You know, it's nice to have that amount of control there. Let's see what we got so far. Wah, distortion, compressor, amp. We've got a cabinet and an IR. The IR is just basically everything, of course, in front of the amp is going to get passed down through the IR, and then that's going straight out. Then this is going down to path 2A. So we have, I'll move these over a little bit, give us some room to maybe do some new stuff down here. But we really have not utilized very much of path 2 yet. We just have it doing, you know, this DSP chip is doing quite a bit up here, whereas down here we just have two things running. So let's see, let's throw something in modulation on there. I'll just do it. I like the Univibe quite a bit. And the Univibe actually works pretty well in front of the amp too. You know, so it works really. It's a nice thing about Univibe, or a lot of modulation. You can kind of, it changes the tone a little bit, whether you do it in front or after the amp, but they work pretty well either way. So we could kind of keep going and keep adding stuff if we wanted to just do more wacky effects or whatever. One thing I wanted to do is show you how to utilize one of the things I do live when I play, as an example, so I don't have to have a separate vocal processing unit, is I will use, right now we're just doing 2A, but I'll use path 2B for vocal processing. So to get a path 2B, I'm going to grab an empty slot and try to grab it. I think I have to assign something to it first. So I'm going to do a mic pre, drag it down. All right, and then this split here, I'm going to pull this down. So now we've got, we can assign an input to this. So I'm going to grab this and say we want the mic. Okay. So you know, right now I've just got the, you can probably hear the vocals tone has changed just a little bit. So we've got a mic pre. Um, let's throw a little dynamics, a little compression on there. And then let's do a little equalizer. And again, I'm not really changing up a whole lot of settings here. I'm just kind of building a standard vocal chain just to show you what's possible. Actually, let me do the 10-band graphic. So with this 10-band graphic, it's, you know, there's plenty of stuff plenty of frequencies to play with. You want to boost stuff way up here, cut it, you know, whatever you want to do. Like I said, this patch isn't trying to get perfect tone or perfect sound, so I'm just kind of showing you what works. I keep saying that, but the reason is because I'm trying to explain why I'm not spending a lot of time in great detail adjusting a lot of individual settings. It's more about just kind of showing you what can be done. So I'm going to come to the end here and throw a reverb on. Check, check. Last thing I want to do is pull this merge block down. So this way, the vocal, right now, this vocal line is discrete. The mic comes in and it goes out. So this is this is how I build a patch for my own live use. So what happens is it runs out to the mixer, and you know, I've got vocals on one path I can completely control. If I want to do delays or distortions or whatever, I can add it to the vocal line. And then I've got basically path 1A, B, and 2A for guitar stuff, which leaves me plenty of room to do that as well. One thing that you can do, if you really want to separate out, let's say you do this where you have a vocal path and guitar path, and let's say you want to separate them out when you go to the mixer. What you can do is you can actually come down here and pan. So you could pan the vocals hard left, and then the guitar stuff hard right. And then that way, when you run out of the back of the Helix, you know, you can send the left to the one, you know, to one channel on your mixer, or you can send the right to another channel, and that way you've got your guitar on one channel of a mixer and your vocals on another channel, which gives you individual control if you want that. Personally, I actually just I kind of balance the levels inside Helix the way I like. So what I do is I just send them both. I don't bother to pan them. I just send them straight out to a powered speaker. But this is a good way to do it, particularly if you want to monitor your vocals louder than your guitar, but you don't necessarily want your guitar to be that much quieter in the main mix. You know, by hard panning, like I said, you can send them to different channels on the mixing console and have some control there. So that's another kind of neat trick you can do with Helix, where it can kind of do double duty, where it's not only your guitar processor, it can also be your vocal processor, which I use it for live gigs. Trying to think of what else to incorporate into this. You know, if you want, I mentioned you can do EQs pre or post. If you do an EQ before the amp, it's going to push the amp a little bit harder. If you want to kind of use an EQ to finish your sound, like you like your tone, but maybe you just want to cut some highs or lows or boost something, you want to put your EQ at the very end of the chain where it gives you the most control. So if I put it here, it's going to affect the overall signal. Let me turn this off. For sake of example, I'm going to just really boost the high end here. Kind of get carried away. I said high end. This is the low end. I'm doing sorry. Apologize. But you can see this affects the overall tone. It's not going to push your amp any harder. Whereas if this EQ was sitting in front of the amp and you start boosting frequencies, you're going to drive the amp and get a little more distortion out of the amp. At the end of the chain, it just gives you a little bit more flexibility for shaping your final sound. So that's kind of some little EQ tricks. For anybody who hasn't used a parametric EQ, with a parametric EQ, you can select your low, mid, and high frequency, which is the frequency it's selected, and then the Q actually affects how wide that band affects the EQ shape. And actually, we'll see how this works. Let me flip over to Ableton, which is what I'm using to record this audio here. And I'm going to show you, I think it'll be easier to show you visually what a parametric EQ looks like. So, bring this up. All right, anyway. So what we have here, let's just pick a band, and you can see the frequency, like in Helix, if we select like the mid frequency, we can see it's affecting how many kilohertz or where it's at in the frequency band. So also here in Ableton, we're seeing the same thing as we move left and right, we're moving frequency. Up and down, we're boosting gain, which is the same thing as the mid gain. But the reason I want to show this is to give you an example of what Q means. So if I boost this all the way and I narrow or pull the Q down, you can see how wide it's affecting everything. If I narrow the Q, it is only going to affect that one band, and widening out the Q kind of determines how much more it gets affected around that band. So that's what this Q, when you see high Q and mid Q and low Q, that's what that means. It's how many frequencies around your chosen frequency gets affected as well. I thought the visual might be an easier way to show you that. So so there's that. So there's some EQ stuff, some routing stuff. We've set up a separate path for vocal processing. And one of the reasons you didn't hear a huge difference in the sound of the vocal is I'm recording the vocal from a dry USB channel from Helix, so it's already being processed. So you already hear an EQ and reverb and all that, which is why you didn't hear a big change. Normally, you would have heard quite a change in the tone when I added all this stuff here. I think that's most everything I wanted to talk about. I did want to mention one other thing. If you want a solo boost or a lead boost, say you want to boost up, make it louder for a solo, there's several ways to do it. My preferred method is to come over to wherever your output's going to be. And so this level lets you boost it. So if you go to controller sign, you select the level parameter. You can pick a foot switch, whatever works for you. And you can select a minimum and a maximum value. So let's say when the foot switch is off, you want it to basically be at 0. And then when it's on, you want 7 decibels of boost. That's a great way to do a lead boost. You're not having to introduce any other blocks or use EQs to do any of that stuff. It's just a great way to, you've just basically got a free way of doing that here without adding any DSP or blocks or any of that sort of stuff. In this case, I've actually got two guitar outputs, so you'd probably want to do the same thing here, and you can assign them to the same foot switch. So what I use foot switch 7, so because this path is going out to, I would do the same thing. Drive, or level rather, foot switch 7. And then I would just, whatever I had that set to, set it accordingly to match these others. So what I just did is these two outputs are both guitar outputs, and so now they're both foot switch 7 will boost both. If you need it. I mean, you have to play with it and see if you actually do need it in both places. Or you may, totally up to you, but that's how you would do it. I think that's most everything I wanted to cover. I've just tried to cover as much as I can think of. I had questions pertaining to routing and splits and merges and EQs and building up, like I said, building up a patch from scratch. I mean, you can see everything I've done here. I'll tell you what do I want to name this? Patch build. Whoops, can't spell. Oh, no, I'm just out of room. I'll post this on Custom Tone and have a link to it in the description. Just if you want to use this as a template. I mean, like I said, this really wasn't a tone video. It was more just how do you do this, how do you do that video. So hopefully it wasn't too rambling and wasn't too boring, and hopefully you learned something. And if I didn't hit the thing that you wanted me to talk about, feel free to post in the comments, and I hope to not take so long in between videos. Hopefully things will be a little bit more calmer and I can do more of these videos. Anyway, thanks for checking it out. Hope it was useful. Please feel free to ask me any questions pertaining to this video or future videos you'd like to see. And just keep rocking, man. The Helix is just a fantastic pedal. I still get excited every time I turn it on, which is saying a lot for a pedal. Normally, the honeymoon phase wears off, but man, it's just this pedal just so deep and so much you can do with it. I just still get excited every time I turn it on. It's a great unit. I can't say enough good about it. So I will close with that, and thanks again for your time. I hope you like it. Let me know what you think. We'll talk to you next time.